Good evening, my friends. Welcome back to Most Haunted with Dan Terry, and it's good to see you all back here. We've had a rough week around this way. I've had my own duel with the devil COVID. I danced with the devil for the last 3 days, and fortunately, it did not hit me as hard as it has hit a lot of people. It was more like a really bad case of the flu. But boy, I hope y'all never have to go through a week like that. It's been tough. But today's looking up because today we've got a guest that I am absolutely honored to have on. He is a paranormal podcaster. He is a producer of paranormal shows and others, and he's been doing this longer than I have. He's an amazing man, and I want you all to meet Alan Smith.
Hey, Dan.
Hey, Alan, how are you?
I'm good. Thanks for having me on.
Well, I'm honored you came here. I'm sure there was a bunch of guys when you said you wanted to be on one of the shows that I think I just happened to be up late at night enough that I was the first on there. But
no, I'm honored. I do like your show. And the opening graphic and the music on your show.
Oh, yeah. That's
so cool. Yeah.
Race, he's amazing. Race does a great job. But now you are actually moving. Are you moving a podcast over to KUNX?
Yeah. So my podcast, Paranormal Now, is syndicated on KUNX at 2 a.m. EST on Fridays.
Okay.
So you can always catch it streaming on KUNX network.
So people can come and see you here in the same place they see me. But more to the point,
there are other people out there who drink as much coffee as I do, and they're up that late.
Thank God for tea. I just never could get to the coffee thing. But
I'm
also,
trying with the tea.
Yeah, it takes a while. So somewhere in your career, you started out doing a very socially relevant topic of alternative lifestyle, marriages, and things like that. It's called Born Equal. And then your way of doing things made a radical turn to Alien versus Bigfoot. You was a producer on that, if I remember right.
Mm-hmm.
And
I was interviewed for Alien versus Bigfoot,
okay.
but a co-producer on Sounds of the Dead, EVP, and Life After.
What made you suddenly switch off into the paranormal like that?
Well, it's not actually that sudden, right? So Born Equal, we started that project in 2008 and finished it roughly around 2012, and finally got onto Amazon years later. But that is that was a passion project. I never set out, my wife and I, to be documentary filmmakers.
Mm-hmm.
We just had friends and family and cared deeply about the LGBT community, so we did a documentary on that. But for me, there is a paranormal aspect even to that, because the thread running through that is spirituality and our own interpretations of our either religious beliefs that we were taught or what we go out and seek and cultivate for our own self. And so there's a wide variety of interpretations of what it means to be, gay or bisexual, transgender, whether it's Navajo, Native American, Wiccan, Christian, Muslim, Hindu. So we had all these different varieties, and all of them have mythology built into their backstory, to the substrate of what makes their belief system. And all of that has supernatural aspects as well. So, it was kind of an easy transition, but I've been obsessed, with the paranormal and ufology since probably about 12 years old, when I first saw my own sighting. But I grew up watching, television series like the one done on Debra Jordan Kauble story, Intruders, as featured in Bud Hopkins' book. And that made a huge impression on me as I was a kid. And I'm sure Deb can speak more to that. But shows, series like that, series like Sightings in the 90s, really had a major influence on me. So it's always kind of been a part of my DNA.
Well, you got me a little later than me, because my references was Kolchak the Night Stalker and In Search Of. So all mine was in the 70s.
Well,
But
I mean, the X-Files was based off of Kolchak, the
Sure.
Night Stalker. Yeah.
Well, since you mentioned her, we got a secondary guest, and that is Debbie Jordan Kauble. Am I pronouncing that right?
Yep.
And you working with Bud Hopkins to me is like amazing. It's incredible because he was such a legend in the paranormal field.
Yeah, I feel blessed and so fortunate to have had him, pick up our case and do this investigation. And I got to spend so much more time with him over the years than people who came after me, because once Intruders came out, he got so in demand, and, it just kind of exploded. So I feel very fortunate.
And Intruders was your story for the most part, correct?
Oh yeah, the whole book is just pretty much about a major experience I had in '83, and then things before and after that, and also other members of my family. So yeah, it's pretty much all us.
And for the folks who wouldn't know, because a lot of my people are all just ghosts, but and there's a few live ones that watch, but mostly ghosts. But for them to know, you were abducted by aliens as a youth.
Yeah.
In your own neighborhood, if I remember right.
Well, yeah. When I was really young, I became missing for a day. I was probably about 6. And I was brought back to where I was supposed to be by my older sister, and then had a couple strange experiences as a teenager, and then one as a young married, and then the major one that spurred on, or that was the trigger that was Intruders. That was in '83, and I was like 20 something, early 20s. So yeah, it's been a lifetime thing.
Now, was these things you remembered all the way through, or is this something that Bud kind of explored with you to bring it out?
Most of what I remember was remembered spontaneously, without any kind of hypnosis.
Okay.
So I would say probably 90% of my memories are just
just yours.
Yeah, it is. Yeah.
No question about those then.
Yeah.
And now you two have worked together at least on Sounds of the Dead, right?
Yeah. Deb was highly featured in the documentary, and I was interviewed for it as well. Yeah.
So how, Deb, did you end up going to the ghost side and EVPs from the alien side?
Well, it's funny because all my life we had paranormal activity in our house growing up. I just thought everyone did. I didn't realize it, I didn't know any different. And then after June 30th, '83, it really ramped up, the paranormal part of it. All the really bizarre stuff started happening paranormal wise. And then I read about EVPs. I can't even remember where it was, because this was a long time ago. This is before I had a computer, before my aware of the internet. And so I tried an experiment with my nephew one day in my kitchen with an old 30-minute cassette tape and an old cassette player. And I recorded what I think now would be considered a class A EVP. I mean, it was beautiful and clear. It was like this old man was sitting in the room with us, and he said, "Are the spirits listening?" And then another one right behind him said, "Can I listen too?" And my brain just went poof. And I had this epiphany that, oh my God, we're the spirits somewhere and somebody's listening to us. Okay. I mean, and my brain just kind of exploded at that point. And I started to get more and more drawn to the paranormal side. I started watching, ghost hunters on TV and stuff like that. And I searched out a paranormal group in Indianapolis, which was close to where I lived, and made contact with them. We talked, and I joined their group. And then that's when I really started learning about paranormal investigations. I had already been at that point a MUFON investigator for several years, which is the Mutual UFO Network. So I had been investigating, UFO reports in the central Indiana area. And I had noticed that a lot of the people who were reporting UFO experiences were also reporting other kinds of paranormal things happening to them at the same time. And I'm like, wait a minute, this means something. And that's when I started to seek out the paranormal side. And then eventually I got actually Muthon and MRIPA, the first group I was with, to work on a couple of cases together jointly, which was really awesome.
Mm-hmm.
And I've just kind of, been in that place ever since. And I really got hooked to the EVP part of paranormal research and captured some really good ones. And it seemed like anybody who's been on paranormal investigations knows sometimes you can go on investigations and you don't get anything for, several investigations. But it seemed like I was getting something almost every time on one of my recorders.
Okay.
And so they called me the antenna, and they always wanted me to go everywhere with them.
Yeah, there's something to that too, because before a ghost box was called a ghost box, there was something similar to it. It came out like in the early 80s, 1980, something like that. I don't remember what it was called, but it was debunked. But then, another person kind of looked at it and said, well, the person that invented this is a function of the box itself, because they are a medium, they're a psychic, and that they're one of the components that actually make it work.
Mm-hmm.
And I think that when Debra says antenna, that makes sense to me, because somehow you are the human mind is like an additional electronic component that ties into the tech that you're using. And that's why someone like Debbie could probably get more. And that's why, you have people who have UFO encounters, Bigfoot encounters, ghost encounters, because I think that they are tuning in to another frequency that most people don't on a normal basis, of course.
So, Alan, are you saying that these are all related in some way? All of these phenomena are somehow related?
Not necessarily. I started going down that path for a while. A friend of mine, Ken Cherry, who was the first person to give me an opportunity to podcast years ago, he very much helped kind of guide me in that direction. But then I started really thinking, like, not really, because we're just using instrumentation, right? Like the brain
Mm-hmm.
or other instruments to observe things. So what an octopus is doing down in the depths of an ocean somewhere is totally unrelated to what a deer is doing out here in my backyard eating our flowers. But I can use the same instruments to observe them, so I think that just because we can see these strange phenomena, and there seems to be this kind of crossover sometimes, which could occur, but that happens in nature as well. It doesn't mean that there's some kind of relationship between the two.
I don't, I recently talked to Tom Ferrario. I don't know if y'all know him very well, but he's doing the Marley Woods investigation, and he's discovered a place where there's UFOs, aliens, elementals, for lack of a better word, poltergeist activity, full-bodied apparitions walking down the road and disappearing into a cemetery, balls of light flying around, and they've even monitored changes in what's going on with the colors of the lights. It just seems like everything really seems to be connected there, kind of like Skinwalker.
Yeah. Well, maybe the connection is that there's this other reality, and so maybe all of those things are in that other reality, and we're kind of peeking through. So that's the connection.
Okay. Yeah. Debra, what's your opinion on all of that, since you've been doing it too?
Well, I'm kind of like what Alan said. I think that it's, in certain areas, I had a vision like one time, and I drew a picture of a glob of bubbles, soap bubbles all connected together. And in my mind, these bubbles were dimensions or universes all touching. And in those, I felt that in those areas where they touched, it would be possible for communication or something to pass through in these areas, but that they moved around and it was fleeting. It didn't last long. Okay. So that's how in my mind, I envisioned these sort of things. When I did the research, the investigation with MUFON and then MRIPA, the only thing that I could ever connect the two together with was the actual person having the experience. That was the only
Okay.
common denominator I could find. Nothing else outside mattered. It seemed like anybody that had these was reporting, both of them just seemed to be like tuned in a little more, like Alan said, or more sensitive to something going on. And one time, J. Allen Hynek, who was a real famous researcher in the UFO community, had made a comment to my mom that he had come to the feeling that maybe not everyone was capable of seeing these things for whatever reasons. And I feel like that's true as well, too.
Okay. Well, I can seen my share of ghosts, but no, I've tried to see UFOs since I was a kid and couldn't find anything. So
yeah. Well, Deb shared with us some photos of orbs, which I know are like highly controversial, but I still think that it is something that we should consider as potentially being some sort of representation of a disembodied spirit or whatever, an elemental, like you said.
Well, I understand that orbs often can be dust or moisture, but I have also seen people who could call orbs to them, and dust generally doesn't come when it's called. And I've seen a lady, she took my K2 meter, was talking to a spirit, and every photo had an orb right where the meter was as it was going off. So there is more to orbs, I've always believed. It's not, I'm not the 99.99% or false. No, there's something to this.
This one was taken in my mom and dad's living room shortly after my mother passed away. And mom came into my mind and something told me to take a picture, and I did. And that orb, that spot you see in the middle there in front of the fireplace was in the photograph. And you don't see any other dust or orbs or anything like that anywhere else, just this one. And it just looks kind of almost solid in a way. And this is one that was also done in mom's house. And I blew this one up, and I don't, I understand. I think I'm saying the word right. Pareidolia,
right.
Where your mind can, but I see now several people have said, oh, I see several alien heads in this. And I do see it when they mentioned it. But what I had focused on was that pink face that almost looks like it's looking up into a mirror or something, that little pink face. And I thought that, is interesting. Now we were we had pulled into the drive of a graveyard, and I told my friends, let's get out of the car. And all of us were like, I don't know. We felt strange and didn't really want to get out of the car. So I rolled the window down and I took this photograph, and all these, you can just see it's almost like we're being looked at by a bunch of people like, who is this here that's pulled in here? And they also have the spot in the center of them.
I have seen the ones from Eureka Springs it's in Eureka Springs, Arkansas. And those orbs all seem to have faces in them. At least a big portion of them do. And these are not pareidolia, or however you say it. It is beards and mustaches and all kinds of things. So very intriguing. What else we got, Al? Go ahead.
Well, you're speaking of pareidolia, right? Because we use that term all the time, but
I think it's become the swamp gas of our.
It kind of has. It kind of has, yeah. But there is a fair argument to say like a pareidolia or apophenia. Apophenia, where you kind of make a connection with something that's not necessarily there. I'd get that, because we're humans. Like, it's the same thing as like when we make an assumption about someone and then it turns out we're wrong. Like, we've made these connections. We thought that it meant this, and it didn't. So I think it's a fair critique, but it is the swamp gas critique, whereas they don't do any further investigation. Debbie, in your emails, you have a quote, I think by Albert Einstein, right? Regarding investigating.
Extraordinary. Doggone it.
I just put you on the spot.
Yeah, I can't remember now. I'm old. I'm going to my emails now, and I'm going to look.
But it really is a great quote, and I every time I see it, it's called. It says, quote, condemnation without investigation is the highest form of ignorance.
Yes.
Albert
And
Einstein.
yes, why
That
didn't I
makes
remember
sense.
that?
Yeah, I love that. And that goes both ways though, right? Like, so, you can be out there looking for paranormal evidence, but you can just cherry pick things and be like, oh, I want to believe that that's that. And then the scientists do the same thing. They cherry pick the evidence that we present, and they're like, foregone conclusion already in their mind.
But when you show that same picture to 15 different people, if it was pareidolia, they should all see something different because they're all seeing what they are pulling out. If they're all seeing a guy with a beard, then there's a little more evidence to it that way.
I do agree.
Yeah. So Deb does have some really fascinating EVPs. Do you want to play those now?
Yeah, let's listen.
Okay. All right, so this one is called number 16, and then after we play it, I guess Deb can explain it for us.
Okay.
Yeah, number 16.
Was that a casino?
No.
Sounds like it, right? Yeah.
We were in the Crump Theater in Columbus, Indiana. We were down in the basement of this theater, and it was a very old theater. I think there were 4 of us walking through the basement, which is where the old dressing rooms used to be for the actors. And one of our guys had a football jersey or some kind of sports jersey on with the number 16 on it. And none of us were talking. We were all very quiet. We were recording, and you can hear multiple different voices, some farther away, not really make out what they're saying. So it sounded like there was a crowd down under this theater. And the loudest one, this voice that you hear was absolutely no one who was with us. And we didn't hear anything when we were down there. We walked through this was when we did our original walkthrough. We walked through in silence with our recorders going, and that's what we got.
You guys, I had to jump in here. When Deb said there was a guy with the number 16 on his shirt, look, I've got a big back and I don't have much hair on it, but every one of them just stood up. I had to jump in here and say that. That is crazy, Deb.
Tell me about it.
Great catch.
Yeah, we were so excited when we heard that, when we go through our raw audio and do review, which is such a drag, for hours and hours of nothing.
Yes.
But yeah, that was one of our really good ones.
All right. What else we got?
We have one called I'll let the audience decide, those that are listening, if they can understand it. So we'll play that.
Wow.
It's like the cutest EVP ever. I love it.
The first time I listened, when you sent it to me, I swore it was saying "Hi, Jesus." It took headphones on, but yeah.
Well,
but you didn't hear it say Kmart, right? Like it was pretty
We were doing it was a private home investigation. The complaint had been that they had a little girl that would run up and down the hallway at night and wake people up. And there were no little girls in the family. And so the family had left, and we had set our base station up in the garage and ran all our cameras and everything through the house. And also there's a video that coincides with this as well. The recorder that captured the EVP was sitting on the table. The dog in the video, you can see the dog walk by the recorder on the table and then lay down on the floor.
Mm-hmm.
And the EVP says, "Hi, Ginger," at that time. And the dog's name was Ginger.
Okay.
And that was like, ding, 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 you know. We've got a little girl, which has been one of the things that was reported, or at least it sounds like a little girl. And we have the Ginger, the name Ginger, which was the dog's name. It doesn't get much better than that.
No,
it doesn't. And we're talking about like a spirit box, right? I mean, so you're not scanning through stations at that point. And what's I think amazing about EVPs is oftentimes you have investigators that are recording, like Debbie said, for hours. Nothing comes up, and then one thing pops up that is pertinent to that location or that moment. I mean, statistically, it's beyond astronomical to me that is just some random, excerpt of a radio broadcast somewhere that happened to kind of squeeze through and
at
wind up
exactly the right time.
Right. Yeah.
And we didn't use voice box or spirit boxes or anything like that. Or we didn't even use the radio. We call them the shack hacks, that would just skip through the FM channels without stopping. We didn't even use things like that because that got on my nerves, frankly. Hear loud. We just flat out quiet recording.
Okay.
Yeah.
Well, while we're talking on EVPs, and I know you've got a couple more, but tell me about your video. I think you both worked on the Sounds of the Dead.
Yeah, we did.
I saw it.
Co-produce. It's a good documentary, right?
It is. And forgive me, I can't remember. It was either on Amazon Prime or Tubi. I don't remember where I saw it. Yeah. Tubi. Okay. So how'd you come around that one?
Well, Jeremy Norrie, I interviewed him for one of his documentaries, and then he asked me to be interviewed for one of his next documentaries, and then we built a rapport and a relationship from there. And then we started working together to help out develop Sounds of the Dead EVP. And there's a part 2 coming out called Life After as well. And so we just, developed that kind of, mutual relationship. And it's interesting because Jeremy tends to be a little bit skeptical, open-minded for sure. And, very nice guy, but he's more skeptical. So it's nice to have that kind of, repartee back and forth.
This didn't change his mind.
It didn't, not really. Not totally. I mean, Debbie was interviewed, Rick McCallum, Tony and Shuri Rathman were involved. And all these people provided really good, and you'll see in the film, really good evidence. And he's still not convinced yet. But he does have an interesting interpretation, which is because he's a proponent of psychedelics and marijuana, and he's had some very, what you would categorize as paranormal experiences while on a psychedelic. So he thinks that it would be generated from the brain, which I think he's not totally off base, because as we were saying before, a psychic medium can tap into something, right? And so I think that all a psychedelic is doing is clearing the fog, and letting you see through the veil. And if it's a very physical experience, like experiencers have with extraterrestrials, I think it can still be both. I think you can have a mind that sort of, connects to the other side and still have a physical experience. It's almost like if you go knocking on someone's door and they open up the door and invite you for tea, except in this case, it's not tea. I think it could be a similar thing. So I think both things can be true. I think the brain can be receptive or accidentally, just have a moment of being open to the other side. And in a sense, not inviting, but you've opened the door to these interdimensional beings, whatever we think they might be, to come into your life.
Do you think it requires, and Deb, this comes for you too, because you've been involved in it. Do you think it requires your permission or acceptance to do it? Did the aliens wait for you to be open to them, or did they just come and do it? Take you?
I'm not I'm not sure. I don't know. It's been so much of my whole life. I don't know if it could have been a familial kind of thing, or like my family line, because my mother had
Right.
strange things happen. So I don't know if it was just because I was born of her and she had strange things. So then they followed me. Or I've said before, I don't know if I was in the right place at the right time or the wrong place at the wrong time, depending on your point of view, you know. So I honestly don't know. I just know that it is what it is. It's happened in my life. And,
Okay.
you know.
Yeah. Well, I mean, a lot of these experiences, the majority of experiencer stories start when they're younger, whether it's childhood, teenagehood, early 20s. And my personal experience is that when I was younger, I had, several what you would call paranormal experiences where I was kind of psychically connecting, right? A friend of mine, there was a period where I was just, I think, what I would describe as open. And we would walk down the street and like a light bulb would go off, um, every time we walk down the street together at night, like some light would go off. It was just an odd thing, right? I talked to a plant one time and it started moving, and I was a teenager. I was like, what is going on? And so as I got older, this experience for me became less and less. And I think that our minds are just so much more malleable when we're younger, that and our neurons are growing rapidly, and we're just keyed in to awareness around us. I mean, anybody who remembers, your childhood imagination, or the high and low emotions of being a teenager, we're just so like it's like we're ultra sensitive, and so I think that's why a lot of those experiences do happen when we're younger.
Okay.
I do think that, when I've been out on paranormal investigations, I've always felt like it was important for anybody that was there with us to have an open mind, and not. I didn't want anybody carrying in a bunch of real negative feelings or thoughts in there, because I didn't want, because I feel like negative attracts negative and positive attracts positive. So I just wanted to be as open and neutral, as possible, to allow whatever is there to come through as best I can. I do as I've gotten older, and I've lost some of the fear and from the earlier, more physical experiences, and I feel like I have in my experiences have changed as a result of that, and there are more metaphysical than physical, I guess, is the only way I know how to describe it. So it is, I think, a factor in what you're going to experience, but the state of mind that you're in, and
Well, to ask a question that I'm sure a lot of people wonder, and I don't want to dig too deep into it because you got a book out, but did you actually communicate with these beings face to face, verbally, anything like that?
Yes, I have memories of asking the gray, kind of called them gray guys, that were in my room, in my bedroom. I asked them at first. When I saw them, I was terrified, and I all I could remember thinking was, "Oh, don't come any closer to me, don't touch me." But then I suddenly calmed down, and I was able to communicate with them. And I asked them. They had a black box in their hand, and I asked them what it was, and could I have it? And they said, "No, you can't have it. But when you see it again, you'll know what it's for and how to use it." And then they took it and they went away.
Okay.
So brief communications like that. And then when I was after June 30, 83, I had this period of time where I got, people today call these downloads. Back in the day when I was having it happen to me, I didn't hear such a thing as that. I didn't know what it was, but I would be awakened in the middle of the night with these images and words and thoughts in my head. And I couldn't go back to sleep till I drew the image or wrote down what I was thinking. And that went on for a while. And I feel now in retrospect, that is also some kind of communication with something else. I I still can't say for sure what I've seen and had communication with is actually extraterrestrial alien or something else. I mean, because I think there's a whole lot of different things out there going on, and I may have had communication or contact with more than one thing, like extra dimensional or interdimensional or or as well as extraterrestrial.
Mm-hmm.
And then I got to wonder, some of the extraterrestrial stuff that we think is extraterrestrial, is that maybe not something that lives here and has always lived here, just somewhere else that we don't see? Just like, ants may never be aware of us around them unless we step on them.
Right.
There may be something else living right here on this planet that we're not aware of, but they're aware of us.
Okay.
It's just like we're aware of the ants, but they're not aware of us.
Sure.
You know what I mean?
What do you say on that, Alan?
Yeah, I mean, religion has been telling us this for a long time, right? Mystics, whether it's the jinn or it's angels, this idea that these otherworldly or non-earthly or whatever beings have been living, below, above, and beside us for so long is not that outrageous. Of course, we're talking about religion, so people pick and choose what to believe.
Mm-hmm.
I think that when paranormal investigators or people have actual experiences, not just stories that they're told, what they're experiencing most of the time doesn't fit exactly into any particular religious category. It seems to be a little bit more vague. Even people who do DMT, psychedelic, right? They see like these elf-like creatures, but elf-like, not like they look like elves from, medieval Europe, stories.
Mm-hmm.
They're just elf-like. They don't know really how to describe them. Because what they're experiencing is all up in here. It's not in the physical world. Like, they're going on this trip, and then when they're in this world, it's like they describe almost like you see in Star Wars, kind of going through like this, this warp drive, and then all of a sudden, boom, they're like in this place, and these things are communicating to them. And then I think what we just do is we kind of overlay or our own ideas of what those things are as we try to describe them, whether it's like they're clown-like or they're jewel-like, or there's all these there's variations, like Debbie said, and it's just so hard, like, to put your finger on it and like figure out what it is.
It's incredible theories we're coming up with here. So, do we have more EVPs to put out?
Actually, I was struggling technically with my computer. I couldn't get it, but if you want, we have a really short trailer for the film.
Yes,
and there's
please.
a couple of experts there. Okay, sure.
All right.
Is there anything in the castle that we should be afraid of?
Something is going on.
I had read about EVPs, really felt drawn to it.
11 years ago, I was a complete skeptic.
There's enough compelling evidence out there that we should be taking this seriously.
I lay down in here.
We're back.
The evidence that is showing up today far outweighs anything that's been shown before.
Ooh, what is this? Something beyond the physical body?
Once you open that door, you can't close it.
Is there anyone here?
Wow. Yeah, I saw that right after we communicated the first time, and I thought that was an awesome video.
Yeah, and Dr. Bob Davis, I forgot to mention him earlier. He is, I wish we had more Dr. Bob Davises out there. Robert is just an extraordinarily level-headed and yet open-minded investigator into consciousness primarily. But that's what I think that is kind of like you were talking about earlier, that's what ties all of this together. Like the power of consciousness, and whether these are sentient beings on the other side or it's us and how we're communicating. That's like that tendril that just brings it all together, the substrate. Even when we think about the creation of the universe, from a spiritual point of view, we think of it as this kind of like the demiurge into existence. aware. And that's what is going on here. I think, our desire on our side is to understand ourselves, to be more aware of the reality or realities that we live in. And my guess is that these other beings on the other side are doing the same thing. And then every once in a while, we kind of shake hands.
Okay.
Or we clash on occasion. Yeah, that's true. Yeah.
And Debra, what do you think on this whole topic now? Because you've had more personal contact than I think we've had.
With well, I felt drawn to the whole paranormal side after, witnessing, like I said, in other people who had UFO experiences. They were also having paranormal. But also, another factor for me was that I was a widow, and I was also present for my mother's death and my mother-in-law's death. And I witnessed things during these episodes in my life that led me to believe that there was more to it. And Mom and I had conversations about death before she passed away. And she told me we made a deal that she would let me know if I was right, because we had conversations like, she's like, what if we just die and that's it? I'm like, well, you won't care because you won't know. So, but something happened that she died 11:30 in the morning, and 1:00 in the morning, we were awakened by her picture coming off the wall, rolling down the stairs and sitting up at the end of the stairs. The little cardboard hook was still intact. The nail was still in the wall.
Right.
It was Mom. We made this deal and she did it, so I feel it made me hopeful for, what goes on after we pass, but also I kind of was hoping to be able to continue to communicate with these people that I have lost, and I was. So,
but I believe, my opinion is, they're for some reason not allowed to tell us very much. We could talk personal, but when it comes to asking the great questions, they just don't seem to able to answer.
I had a vivid dream. I thought it was a dream that I saw Bud, and I had never dreamed about him in my life. And I said, is it like I told you I thought it was? Because he was very atheist, and didn't believe in anything.
I did not know that.
No. And I said, is it like I thought? Is it like I told you it would be? And he didn't answer. He just smiled. Yeah. He never said anything. So it's, I don't think they tell.
From a skeptic's point of view, you can be like, oh, it's a mystery because it's not real. But I would look at it from the other side and say, if we assume there's life after death and there's multiple dimensions, and there's aliens visiting us and in a sense, assaulting people sometimes, right? I mean, abduction experiences can be quite hard. Some of them that I've heard. The majority, not so much, but on occasion, it, and even if they don't hurt one directly, it can be traumatic either way. But there is this kind of like trickster element, or this secret. There's a secret that they're hiding, right? Like the other side just won't share the secret, but then you have a dream like this where it's not shared with a smirk. So it's almost like we know something, we can't tell you exactly, but it'll make sense later, which from an atheist point of view drives you nuts. Because it's like, that's no excuse. But then at the same time, maybe that's the whole point. Maybe as a species, we have to do more work. Like we kind of have to figure it out, on our own for some reason, and I don't know why. I was raised Catholic. It could be this, God's a mystery. His intention's a mystery. You just have to trust it, right? So, if I'm not saying extraterrestrials are God or anything like that, but but if they are privy to whatever higher realm of consciousness or reality there is, maybe they understand that for whatever reason they can't tell us, and we got to go through it ourselves. like Dante's Inferno, I guess.
And Deborah, how did you recover from it had to be, like you said, traumatic. What happened to you? You were still kidnapped.
I've been fortunate because there were other witnesses, and there was physical evidence left behind. And so I've been fortunate that I've had a lot of support. Of course, finding Bud, getting in touch with him, and then the way he handled things. And he sets up a buddy system, and, he connected me with professionals. And I've just been blessed to have had support for over the years. And that's really helped me a lot. And even though it was hard in the beginning to speak out publicly, I have gotten a lot of support that way too. As with every other traumatic thing I've had happen in my life that wasn't paranormal, I found that talking about it with anybody who would listen is helpful.
Okay.
It's helpful. So that's just how that's how I've gotten through everything, is just sharing with other people. And
was he able to connect you with people who at least believed in what you were saying? Okay.
Yes.
Because I'm sure that time there were experts who didn't even want to go down that path.
Even MUFON didn't want our case in the beginning, back in the 80s, because they weren't interested in anybody who'd seen a creature. They just wanted nuts and bolts craft sort of things. So, I mean, that's why we called Dr. Hynek at the Kufos Center instead of MUFON. And so, it was hard.
Okay.
Yeah, and I think that's interesting that Hynek evolved the way he did, and I think that gives him more credibility. And I think Jacques Vallée, Alan Hynek, when they were entertaining some of these more exotic ideas, and Jacques still today, and these are very smart people who've been studying it for a very long time, and have been responsible in their scientific approach to it, and yet they're not disregarding these stories. Right? They're not just tossing them out and saying, it's BS and it's swamp gas. They're Jacques in particular, who's still with us, is still doing the work. But I keep going back to this lately. I don't know why, but so I had a psychedelic experience on psilocybin mushrooms, and it was one of my bad trips. It was, and I don't do this anymore. And anybody who's listening, if you do decide to do psychedelics, do it extremely responsibly, do your research, and have someone there who is sober, just in case. But I had this, what I would call like a cosmic download. And it was literally like all knowledge of the universe was being streamed into my head. And it was this overwhelming, intense feeling in my brain that I'd never felt before, to the point where I literally fell down on the ground, and I was like with my hands over my head, almost weeping because I couldn't do anything with it. And then afterwards, I only remembered bits and pieces. And I think the point of that was that we can't be told all the answers, because in this human form, it's possible our brains can't handle it. It would just break us down. It's like a brain is like a computer, right? Like our brains are a 1984, Macintosh versus like a quantum computer, 100 years from now. And I think that's why we can't be told all the answers, because it's so big, it's so much, and it's almost incomprehensible,
And I suspect that's what I was trying to get at earlier with the spirits not answering our questions. There's just, we aren't able to process whatever happens on the other side. But I've never thought of that from the alien aspect before, and that is an intriguing theory. So Deborah, what do you think of that theory, that the cosmic downloads? You said you felt it.
Yeah. I've never done mushrooms. I was always too chicken. But I mean, I experienced similar things sporadically and randomly for that first year after the June 30, 83 thing. Maybe being hit with that light coming into my eyes did something that triggered that. I don't know.
And could that information still be locked in your head somewhere?
I feel like it is. Well, I don't know where else it would go, but yeah. And maybe it's slowly being coming out a little bit at a time in these lucid dreams that I have every now and then, or intuitions that I find myself having. And I'm learning that the more I trust them, the sharper they get. So, maybe that's all part of it too.
Yeah, that's interesting. I like that idea that the dreams can sort of help like a background program that can help sort out some of these really just out there abstract concepts that you've downloaded or learned, and help kind of filter it so that you can digest it to some degree, bits by bit. That makes sense.
It does make a lot of sense, because we have to assume these people know more about us than we do. And if they're not out to hurt us, there's got to be a way of doing it without causing permanent damage.
Yeah.
And I wonder how many of the folks who are clinically insane were actually experiments in the years gone by.
Yeah. No, who's to say? I've always said, who is it that says the people in insane asylums that hear voices aren't really hearing them?
Yeah, absolutely.
Who's to say? Who's the judge?
So, Alan, you've got... Go ahead. No, please.
I was going to say, certainly some of those cases of schizophrenia are legit schizophrenia. There's a psychological problem. There's a problem with the neurology. But then, it makes you wonder that on occasion, because a psychic medium is not a schizophrenic, and yet they're telling you, oh, I'm receiving a message. Someone who does remote viewing is not a schizophrenic, and yet they're able to do these things, right? So
exactly.
And we've all seen One Flew Over the Cuckoo's Nest, right? I mean, back in the day, if you shared some things that you saw, remote viewing, psychic or otherwise, you might have been locked up, and then they made you crazier while you're locked up, and made you feel crazy. So, that is, you're right. In times of old, especially, I mean, how many people were just, tapping into something else?
One of the sensitives that I work with a lot, and I've interviewed him here twice, his parents actually put him into a mental facility because their religion would not allow him to see the spirits he was talking to. Now, he's a very gifted sensitive, but I wonder how he would have been before if they'd have nurtured that rather than tried to block it.
Yeah.
And his sister is also sensitive, but he didn't know it till after his parents died. She said, I saw what they did to you. So I wasn't going to tell him.
Yeah. And, despite all these darker aspects of it, these subjects make me happy. It gives me hope. I find it tantalizing, to go down these rabbit holes. And I know some people go down the rabbit holes and they can get into like the fringe kind of crazy area. But for the most part, I think all of us are interested in this stuff. Like, we find joy in the whole process of having these conversations and investigating. And, we just moved out of the city into the, more rural area. And, a parallel would be like being plugged into the crazy city life, getting on the subway, the lights, the noise, blah, blah, blah. And then just going out to the backyard where it's like nice and quiet. And I think that when you're investigating the paranormal, that's what you're doing. You're kind of tapping into nature and that more, ethereal, divinity, or whatever you want to call it, literal or not. And I think we're all doing that on a daily basis.
And you're tapping into a part of yourself because you are a part of all that goes on around you. So,
well, in the final minute or so we have, folks, do you have anything coming out? You said the Life After is coming out soon, the show?
Yes, there's not a release date yet, but it should be coming, I think, within a month or so. Just so keep your eye out for that on Tubi as well. And I am wrapping up in a few weeks. I'll finish my own documentary called Half Light, which, Ray Hobbs, who's a producer here, is interviewed for. And it's my personal interest in the people like you and Debbie and myself, with
Mhm.
why we're so obsessed with these topics.
Okay.
So I'm excited to share that in a month
Be
or
sure
so.
and let me know before it comes out. We'll get you back on here. And
Thank you.
you'll have your
Yeah.
own show. So, and Deborah, are you working on anything with your story?
I have a book that came out in August called it's called Extraordinary Contact: Life Beyond Intruders. And then I have a website that I've had for 20 some years where people who want to share their experiences with me or talk to me can write to me there. And it's called debshome.com.
Okay.
You know, and I'm just kind of cruising along trying to get my retirement legs. So
I understand. Believe me. All right. Well, Alan Smith and Debra Kauble, thank you so much for showing up. You guys have been awesome. Just being able to throw these wild theories out has been great.
No, thanks, Dan. And I'm glad you're feeling better too.
Well, thank
Yeah.
you. We'll talk to you soon.
Okay.
bye-bye.
All right, folks, real quick, thank you for showing up. Thank you for listening. These people are interesting, so go to Tubi, check that out, and you all stay spooked.